get this recording then. I think that should be going. Perfect. We are away. Let me turn my phone over so that won't bother me. So, yeah, I wanted to talk to you while I've got you here, is to talk about, as much as possible, just to get a kind of handle on your creative process. I've been obsessed with this myself for a long time, spoken to a lot of people about it, and I always find there's a lot of similarities, but then there's a lot of little nuances between people, and I just always found it interesting. It's been years that I've been sat listening to people talk about their process. No one ever likes talking about it because they just think, oh, well, it's just something I take for granted. But I always find that that's the most interesting thing I get when I'm listening to people and seeing people with their experience.
No, I'm with you. You can't learn anything when someone, it really annoys me when you talk to someone and they say, oh, I don't know, I just came up with it. Well, that's no good to me. I can't learn anything from that.
Exactly.
What I want to learn is break it down. It's like a car. You're fixing an engine. It's no good to say to me, I just fixed it. Tell me, did you start with the carburetor, the exhaust, and the electrics, the what, and
exactly.
Then I can learn.
I still can't figure out how to fix a car, but I try anyway.
No, you're a generation. Yeah.
I thought the first place, because I always think that I'm obsessed with the idea when it comes to like creativity. A lot of people don't like to hear this, and I've found increasingly as I get asked these questions, it's kind of annoying. But I always come back to the first thing that you've got to do, and I think this is in a lot of your writing. This is clear to me, but it starts with the research, and it starts with the knowledge, and it starts with those little openings you have in many of your pieces that you write, and I think this goes for creative work too. Is it all comes down to that research, and I just wondered, how do you go about researching and finding those ideas and getting inspired to find that stuff? What's the actual kind of, on a technical level, do you record your thoughts? Do you see something and think that's cool, or are you led by a particular project or a particular thing that you want to write? How does your research?
So I think it's a generational thing, and I remember we learned before there were planners, so we had to do it ourselves. There were no such thing as planners. That was all made up later. People now act as if planners have always been there. No, that's an add-on bit later. Originally, it was copywriters, art directors, account men, and we'd sit there. The account men would say, "Here's the problem." So the first thing I do, and I don't expect an art director to do this because he's got a different job to me. But I was always taught in New York, where I was taught, a good writer should be able to keep 2 or 3 art directors busy, because theirs is a much more labour-intensive job. And we didn't necessarily. I mean, you had teams, you had your favourite art director maybe, but you don't sit there while he's doing all his work. It's so much work for an art director. Once I've done the idea and the body copy, there's nothing left for me to do. What am I going to do? Sit around and watch him take the photograph, and sit around and watch him pick the typography, and sit around and watch him do the line breaks? That's wasting 2 or 3 days when I could be doing another ad. So, but what I'd be doing while he'd be doing that, when you learn this from Bill Bernbach, you learn all the great guys drew from the same source, which is Bill Bernbach. John Hegarty, Robin White, Charlie Saatchi, everybody, John Webster, everybody drew from Bill Bernbach. And what Bill Bernbach was, you start off as a writer, you are not going to trust anybody else with your ad. So you start off, you're going to do the mining for the raw material that you're going to use. And maybe you can find something that nobody else has found. And you don't just sit at your desk and wait for this piece of paper to land on your desk like they do nowadays. You actually go out there, and a lot of the job was finding things nobody else has found. And before computers, I would go to car showrooms, if I was working on a car, I'd read all the reports, I'd go to the showrooms, I'd look at the competition showrooms, I'd drive as many cars as I could, I'd talk to the guys that made the cars. I always found the best place to go was talk to the R&D guys, the guys that actually built the product, whether it was a blancmange or whether it was a hi-fi. The guys that built the thing know why they built it, and they know what makes it better than the competition, because they're the R&D guys. They had to put it together. And you talk to those and you'll find out all about the competition, and I would nearly always come back knowing more than the client, the marketing guy. And I'd have to explain, the marketing guys, they're marketing. They don't know. Their job is different to mine. Their job is marketing, right? But I talk to the R&D guys. We are more blue collar, what we do. Marketing guys are white collar.
Sure. And it's that going to the product and figuring out those elements that is the key, isn't it? I can remember seeing there's a guy who works not in the kind of agency world. He's a direct response guy in America, but he gave a great talk, and he was saying that as a copywriter, and we're kind of on copy, but you've got to basically know more than the expert. You've got to become an expert on that product. You've got to figure out.
Not rocket science, is it? Yeah. Of course. The more you know, the better you're going to be. It's not difficult, is it? Tim Lindsay was saying to me, Tim Lindsay, he's the chairman of D&AD, and he used to be the chairman of TBWA and Y&R and Lowe's. He's CDP. The guy knows what he's doing, Tim Lindsay. He says to me, the best planner he ever worked with was Tony Brignall. Now, Tony's a copywriter, and as a copywriter, he's won more D&AD awards than any other copywriter in the country. And you don't do that by sitting at your desk waiting for some university-trained account planner to drop a bit of paper on your desk. The guy's not creative. He's been to university. He's a planner. How is he going to know? So you're restricting your possibilities to what some university-trained account planner is going to put on a bit of paper. And now you're going to call yourself creative. I don't think so. I don't think that's a very creative way to behave. I think you're just the wrist for a planner when you behave like that.
You mentioned you're always looking for ideas, and while the others are creating the artwork around a piece of copy that you might have created, and you're already looking to the next thing. You're going to the product, you're going to the people behind the product and trying to figure that out. And you're doing that all the time. Are you doing that? Do you do that proactively? And it might seem like an obvious thing for what you do, but you're not just reacting to maybe a brief that you get in, like, oh, this week we're doing cars. You're always looking for interesting ideas. This is going to sound a bit wanky, but in their natural habitat, like this, like, oh, that's an interesting thing. Maybe one day I'll be able to use that in an
That's
ad
exactly
somewhere.
now. Carl Alley,
collecting stuff like that.
Carl Alley, who's one of the greats in New York. I trained at his agency, Carl Alley's agency, and he's one of the greats after Birnbach, the second generation. And Carl Alley said, the creative person wants to be a know-it-all. They've got an inquisitive mind. They want to know everything about everything from pork futures to flower arranging to motor car engines. They want to know everything about everything. They don't know when it's going to come in useful, but they know it is going to come in useful. They've got an inquisitive, inquiring mind that puts things together. And I find people like that, people like Paul Arden. I love Paul Arden. He was one of my best mates. You'd sit down, he'd want to know everything about everything. Things he knew, the more he knew nothing about something, the more he'd want to know about it. And now, you sit down and then you talk to so-called creative guys who sit at their desk and wait for a bit of paper to come on there, and their limits of what they're going to do is what's on that bit of paper. That was done by a planner. Now, a planner's rightful job, if he's got any job, is research groups and people. He's not going to know how the product was put together. That's not his job. He's not going to go down to the factory and talk to the R&D guys. You look at where Vorsprung durch Technik came from. It didn't come from a planner. It came from Hegarty in the factory. Yeah? And you look at any of the great stuff, it comes from... if you are in the creative department, you will be able to spot creative things at source that other guys don't. Look at what planners do. They don't do that. That's not their job. Their job is... John Steele, I think, was saying that when he would talk to John Webster, John Steele, the planner, was saying when he would talk to John Webster, he wrote the book Truth, Lies and Advertising. Really interesting book. He was saying that when he would talk to John Webster, John would say, never mind the brief, just sit down for an hour or so, we'll have a drink, sit here and talk to me about the people that buy this, the woman that buys this. Where do her kids go to school? What TV programs does she watch? What makes her laugh? What does her husband do for a living? Where does she do with her spare time? Blah, 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 blah. John does it like taking on a role, like an actor taking on a role, until he understands that character inside and out. Now, that's the planner's part of it. Now, then the creative part of it, it's the copywriter. Now, I've got to do that. Go to the brewery and talk to the head brewer. So tell me, what sort of hops do you use? What sort of grain do you use? Where does it come from? Why do you use that? What sort of vats do you use? Why do you use smaller vats than other people? Why does your yeast live where other people's yeast doesn't live? How old is your yeast? Yeah. Now, I might not use any of that, but somewhere in there, it's like panning for gold. There might be a load of mud. There might be a week panning nothing but mud, and then you might get a nugget.
And that's the thing, isn't it? I'm glad you said that. You said a few things that I completely agree with, and it kind of goes with what I think about things. But you've said that obviously you're looking at the detail, and that you've just got to keep asking why. I always say the most useful question in copywriting is why. You just
Yeah,
keep
of
asking
course,
why.
100%.
And someone eventually, you act like an idiot, and eventually the R&D person or the creator of the product will go, it's because of this, and
Yeah,
that will be
yeah,
the bit that's interesting, and that's what
yeah.
you're looking for.
I mean, I think a lot of what's is people's laziness in not questioning things, which is uh, which is a big problem. So they think they come out of ad school and they think everything's cast in stone, and you have to be a team, and you have to be. I said to some kids the other day at school, I said, which one's the art director? They said, oh, well, we both do that. I said, okay, which one's the copywriter? They said, oh, well, we both do that. I said, let me put it this way. If the spelling's wrong, which one do I fire? And then they quickly said, oh, that's him. They were right. I can get it. One of you is responsible here, and one of you is responsible here. And Gordon, my art director, guy I've worked with for ages, Gordon, nobody touches his fucking art direction, not me nor nobody. Yeah. And he would only work with the best copywriters. And that doesn't mean copywriters like capital C, capital W. That means thinkers. That means people that are going to give them. I'm exactly the same with art directors. When I've done the thinking, I want someone who's going to sprinkle stardust on that.
Sure.
And I don't want, we're not going to go around holding hands like like Darby and Joan everywhere and all doing each other's job and sitting there and having a cup of tea. Man, we got stuff. This is like a team game, You're on the left wing, I'm on the right wing. You look after your zone, I look after mine. That's how we win this game. We don't all hold hands and run around together. And I think the laziness of that is part of what makes it weak. So you don't end up with a 100% copywriter works with 100% art director. You end up with 50% of a team works with 50% of a team, and you've got two 50% together. And I find it very weak.
Sure,
and
sure.
When students ask me, what do we do then? How does it work? And I say to them, well, think of it like this. It's like a fighter bomber. Most air forces now, their planes are fighter bombers, two-man planes. So you've got to deliver ordnance, bombs or rockets or whatever, to a certain place in a certain time, and you've got to get through the enemy to do it. Now, the pilot is the art director. The navigator is the copywriter. The more senior of the two in any situation is always the navigator. He's the one who handles the ordnance, what we're carrying, where's it going to. He's in charge of the mission. The guy who's in charge of the plane is the pilot. You think of it that way, and Gordon's shaking, nodding his head furiously. That's exactly how he sees it. This is my plane, and I'm going to get it there, whatever, no matter what. Now, when we get there, that's your job.
Yeah.
You handle what we're doing and how we get there. So Gordon's got to outthink every other art director, every other ad in that magazine, everything else on that screen. He's got to kill everything else with his art direction to make sure it gets seen. When he's done that, I better be delivering the right message.
Sure.
So, but you have to think of it as a team like that, not as we're two identical units and we hold hands because it's nice to be friends.
Yeah, it's the special. Of course, you're working together. I think it was. I always remember. I think it was. Is it Pink or Pinker? A book that he said where everybody's T-shaped, and you're all in like to sell, and that's the thing. But then you have your specialism within that, and that might be the copy, that might be the art direction thing. You're all trying to get to the same place, but you've all got a specialism within it.
It's the way Alex Ferguson puts a team together. You don't have 11 David Beckhams. You got a Scholes, you got a Giggs, you got a Beckham, sure. You got everybody's doing a different job. And if you can get them all to link up in that different job and best at their position, you got a winning team.
Sure. So you mentioned, to bring it slightly back onto you're going around, and it's what I thought you'd say, and I thought you'd do, is that you're basically digging around and you're trying to find from a product, you put in the time in, and just having that like insatiable curiosity to what's going on in the product. You're trying to find it, and you know that eventually, if you keep looking, you'll get all of this information, but there'll be that nugget in there, that golden piece that is like, this is gonna where I can hang the hook around. This is where I can do this.
Yeah,
But then,
if you can't find it, and sometimes you can't, that's when you move to stage 2, which is now I've got to create it.
right, okay.
You know,
But,
so like,
yeah,
well, you know, like Bill Burnback with Avis, or I've seen John Webster do it loads of times. Half of the time there is something there, and you've found it, and then you can actually, you've found something no one else has found.
sure.
And then, but if you can't, then the answer's not in the product. Then the answer's in the consumer.
Yep.
Then you've got to go and look and say, okay, well, what does the consumer want? And now we start from that end, and that will be brand advertising.
Sure.
So
No,
product.
I completely agree with you. I always say there's not, you don't really need to overcomplicate when people say, where do you get ideas? It's either going to be in the product or it's going to be in the person consuming the product.
Absolutely. See the
An
product
eye of either of those, you're going to find it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I mean, what we do, I think, as copywriters, is keep reducing and reducing and reducing down to simplicity. David Ogilvy, I'm not a fan of David Ogilvy, but he said, which is great, he said strategy is sacrifice. And what we do is keep reducing, as copywriters, keep reducing and keep reducing and keep reducing, whereas other people, all the other people, planners, account men, clients, will keep loading on more and more stuff because their job isn't communication. You know, people confuse advertising with marketing. No, advertising is not marketing. Marketing is marketing. Advertising is the voice of marketing. They decide how they're going to sell this, what people are going to buy, but we've got to get heard amongst the 1 out of 100 that actually cuts through that noise tonight and gets remembered and gets people, and we transfer that. How we get that to go viral is we get off the screen and into the language. And that's our job. That's not marketing's job. They're not going to know how to do that. They're going to know whether it should be 6 for the price of 5, but they're not going to know how to actually get into the language, people, and how to get people talking about it. That's what we do. And we need to keep those things separate. When people think what we do, advertising, is a subset of marketing. No, there are 90% of the marketing out there is in advertising, marketing dressed up as advertising is invisible, because if you do marketing as advertising, it's just mood boards with a trendy soundtrack on and a little teeny logo at the end that you hope wins a Cannes Award. That's like, and you know, that's really not what we do. I think if you get back to the more and more simple we can keep it, the more chance we've actually got of using that space, or that 30 seconds, or however long, or whatever space we've got, keeping it simple and powerful. The more we clutter it, the more we forget our context, which is working amongst a whole plethora of other people.
Sure.
And marketing doesn't know that because they're not in the communications business. But we all know what the numbers are. I think it's generous, but the numbers are £20 billion spent every year in the UK on advertising, of which 4% remembered positively, 7% remembered negatively, 89% isn't noticed or remembered. So that's out of 20 billion quid, over 18 billion quid pissed away. Because if it's not noticed or remembered, it doesn't matter how clever or correct or insightful you are. It's not going to get seen, therefore it's invisible. So our job is getting it noticed, to be in that 4% or in that 7%.
And that comes, as you say, and I was going to ask you about this because you've written about it before, you've said it many a time, and you spoke to it there. It's that boiling down, it's that stripping away. You've got all of this information as a copywriter, as a team, whether you're working with people or whether you're by yourself, sat there trying to figure it out. You've collected all this information. You've got as much as you can. You've asked why to the nth degree, and you've got all of this stuff. Now you've got to take all of that you've got, and you've got to whittle it down to something that is crystal clear and conveys the message.
Yeah.
And that's really where the work is, isn't it? That's where we're learning that patience is the key for most people.
That's the easy bit. That's the easy bit. The tough bit is after that. They're getting it down to what your message is. It's work, but that's the easy work. Now the tough work is now take that and get it noticed and remembered.
How to express that message.
That's where John Webster was a genius. That's where I'd look at that and be in awe of him, because that's where you really need an art director. I mean, the
So
copyright
then
job
that's
is
how
done.
you're expressing it, and you've got the idea, you've got what you want, but then it's how do you visualize that message and take it out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, I remember when Chris Wilkins had written this script for Smash Martians of these characters on Mars who John was on holiday, and Chris has written this script for these characters on Mars who couldn't see why anybody on Earth would do anything as stupid as bashing up potatoes and mashing them. Yeah, we all looked at the script and we all thought, well, it's all right. It's no big deal. It's what is it? Monster Munch. Do you remember those Monster Munch things?
Yeah,
Big spongy animals, a bit Doctor Who and that.
yeah.
And yeah, big deal. It's all right, nothing special. And John came back from holiday and John saw it and John said, no, this is the one. He started laughing his socks off. And then John put the Dalek's voice on it and John got the Daleks laughing and John made the faces out of 2 bits of tin that look like they're laughing and 2 bicycle hooters for eyes. And now you've transformed it by 500% into something that's fantastic. So Chris had done all the copyright work of getting it right down to what you're saying. But what John did was then explode it into what's going to catch on and be remembered for the next 20, 30 years. That's the hard bit. That's the bit I really, really struggle with. And like I say, John Webster was a genius at that. He'd just do it week in, week out. That's the other bit is work, but it's logical, sensible, reductive work. Suddenly, when you've got there, you're dropped off in the middle of this barren landscape. Now come up with an idea.
So you've got that, and to naturally follow it through, and we'll put a little narrative on what we're really talking about here. You've gone there, you've done all that research, you've dug down, you've done the laborious work, shall we say? But technically, you shouldn't get into this game if you're not interested in and curious and wanting to find that stuff. But you do that kind of labour work where you're finding the idea. Then you bring that down, you whittle it down. That's the creative bit a little bit because you're trying to find and bring that thing out. And then you're handing it over to the people who are going to express that.
You're not handing it over. You're part of it. I mean, it's your job to express it.
Sure, but you're helping express that.
It doesn't go away, but now the real work starts.
Sure. Yeah. But then, well, this is what I'm interested in. How do you how do you handle feedback at that stage then? Because obviously now you're talking to others. You've got this idea. You've got this piece that you think is boiled down. You think it's going to make a connection, but then you're obviously throwing that out to other people. How do you handle the feedback process? How do you think how has that best worked for you over time?
Right, so I'm a much better creative director than I am a copywriter. And like Alex Ferguson's a much better football manager than he was a player. Bill Burnback's much better creative director than he was a writer. They're different jobs.
Sure.
And I found it much easier as a creative director because I can change the team around. So I can set up a system. I've got a brain that naturally defaults to systems. I can set up a system where I can make sure everybody gets plenty of time and everybody is incentivized to work hard, but we'll have one team on it for a week and a different team on it. And then every few days I'll check progress. And if there's no progress, I'll switch it. And eventually, by the end of a couple of weeks, everybody will have had a crack on it. And by that time, if nobody's got anywhere, then me and Gordon have still got a few days left to have a go at it before the deadline. And a lot of mistakes have already been made. That's how creative directors come in at the end, when a lot of mistakes have already been made. But hopefully you've had you've had a logical team have a look at it. You've had a flair team have a look at it. You've had a style team have a look at it. You've had a chance to try, Beckham as against Scholes, as against Giggs, as against Keane. You've had a lot of different ways to look at it. So now, how do I do it on my own? Well, that's difficult. I'm not John Webster. John, do you know what I mean?
But that's interesting. You the way you put that system together, and to use the Alex Ferguson, you've got those different types of players with those different skill sets, and to give a piece of creative work its best chance, and you're basically allowing those people to put their strengths on it rather than trying to figure out where there might be a mistake or a weakness. You're saying, well, how would you look at this? How would you play this particular ball? and they go, oh, this way, and that might bring out something good. Or it might be a case that it's not that their particular strengths that will work for this piece.
Yeah,
and
sure,
different
sure,
team
sure.
might pick up.
Yeah, yeah. You know, you've got to sometimes dig the dirt away to find there's nothing there. I would watch John a lot. For 10 years I worked with John, and I would watch John, and John would come in usually at the end after everybody else had had a go. So he'd see a lot of what the mistakes had already been made. And what I learned from John is it's not who says it, it's who spots it. Yeah. And once you learn that, that's quite freeing in a way. It doesn't have to be my idea. I just have to be the one who spots the idea.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that. Just recently I wrote a thing myself because I was working on a piece of copy, and I'd gone away. I'd been tasked with going away and coming up with the idea, and I'd written all this stuff, sent it through to the creative director, if you like, who turned around and said, "Oh, I love all this. This is fantastic. This thing," and he'd summarised something I'd said, but how he'd said it by summarising without even realising it was by far more powerful than anything I'd written.
Yeah.
But I'd been able to spot that. He didn't know it was in him. He didn't know he was saying that. But I was the guy who spotted it.
Exactly.
That's the piece. That's good. And that's the skill. It's not the skill. It's the freedom. I think when you become more mature in your work,
Right, it totally is.
Anyone can take it. Anyone can take the praise. Yeah.
Exactly that. I'd sit in a room with John Webster, and we'd work on something, and John would say, and I'd talk for a bit, and John would say, "Hey, that's brilliant." And I'd say, "What?" He said, "That thing you just said." And I said, "What did I say?" And if John hadn't been there, I'd have steamed right past it and forgotten it. But because John's there, he picks it up, I write it up, and I get a DNA award. You know, just and I didn't even notice it. So it's like Alex Ferguson spots it. He can't go on the pitch and kick the ball in the net, but he can spot who can, and he can spot how to make it happen. And I think the transition from being what they used to do a lot, which I think doesn't work for me, is you take the best copywriter or art director and make them a creative director. I don't think that's right. I think that just becomes you competing with the rest of the department. I think when you take someone, the job is now for you to take ownership of the whole department, and now the job is like to make sure this team wins, not for me. And ideally, Kenny Dalglish said a thing that I love. Kenny Dalglish, they made him player manager. He's a great player. And when he was getting near his retirement, to keep him for a while at Liverpool, they made him player manager. And they said, I saw him interviewed on TV, and they said, "Hey, getting on, Kenny? What's it like the transition to manager?" And he said, "Not bad." He said, "I know I've got the team right when I can't get on it." And that's a great lesson for me. I always felt that I'd failed if I had to write the line at the end of it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times what I'd do is, not a lot of times, but sometimes what I'd do is I'd write the script and I'd put someone else's name on it, because I don't want to be known as a copywriter now. I want to be known as a creative director. So even if I've written the script, I want people to think that's Dave's department. I don't want them to think that's Dave.
Sure.
Yeah. So it's that change in your head to go from competing with your department to managing your department. You know, I get credit when the department wins.
I think it speaks to just creativity in general, though, in that it sounds a bit wanky, but the kind of theory of abundance and the theory that there is no competition. It's just if you're serving yourself to the work, to the ideas, and that it doesn't matter where they come from, it doesn't matter who do, share those things, because other people find them and other people get them, and then you might use them. You might give someone an idea that they use, they might give someone an idea you use. You can only have more and better ideas.
No, that's true, and that's very. I found it easy once I became a creative director. As a writer, I find it difficult because sometimes people would take my idea and write it up as theirs. Well, that's not good to me. You just took my idea and nicked it. But as a creative director, that's exactly what I want you to do.
Sure.
So, and it's kind of like when you're writing anything, like you write. What stops you writing is judging it while you're writing it. So if you have your head in two places, if you separate the writing off from the editing, so first off, if you write it, just do a mind dump, get it all out. Knowing that later, it's not going to run like that, because later on I'm going to come back, go have a cup of coffee, forget about it, and I'm going to come back and read it. Now I'm going to start crossing it out. I'm rewriting it because now my head's changing from the doer to the reader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, so that's the part of it we're talking about, which is in the second part of your process, when you've now got to come up with ideas. What John was always way better than me. I'm like I say, I'm a logical person. I'm a thinking person. John was a feeling person, and art directors tend to be more copywriters tend to be more thinking people. Art directors tend to be more feeling people. That means you can judge it, whereas a copywriter you can't really judge it. Copywriter, art director can say that works. I think it works. It feels like it works. Whereas a copywriter, you say, it should work. It makes sense that it works. So now the first part, that's right. It should work. It makes sense that it works. But now when you're putting it together, then it's more like, this feels right. This feels exciting. This feels good. That's when you need the other side of it. And that's where I'm weak. And that's where you have to try to learn to get rid of the doing part of your brain and get into the editor part of your brain, the second part, which is feeling. And that's difficult for me when I'm like, oh, we'll have a tiger here. Well, I don't know, is a tiger funny? I can tell you logically why it should be.
Yeah.
I can tell you why it's right, but I can't tell you if it's funny. And that's where you need to work with someone. Or
it's either you work with people. I know, I feel exactly what you're saying. I'm literally writing a book at the moment, writing the thing. I think it's, this sounds good, but then my partner, Ruth, is an artist, and her reaction to it is completely different to how I think it. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But the only intimation of that you can make is to get that time difference, isn't it? It's to get away, as you say, to get from reading it as you've just written it and give it some time.
Well, that's when you're doing it on doing it on writing. What I would do with ideas was there was a GGT. You kind of work out for yourself who's the person who you trust more than you trust yourself. If you're weak on feelings, if you're weak on logic, then you find someone who's strong on logic. If you're weak on feelings, like I was, you find people who are strong on feelings. So at GGT, it would be Mike Greenlees, Gordon Smith, and Paul Grubb. You put those three people together, and if they all agreed on something, I trust them more than I trust myself, because they generally had taste that chimed with the ordinary person's.
Sure.
I tend to overthink things.
Yeah.
So when I think something and I think, not funny enough, it needs a few more jokes. Now put some more jokes in, and now it's so crammed with jokes, ordinary people don't get it.
Yeah.
But I something really ordinary and crass, I put it down, and Paul Grubb would say, hey, that's funny. And Gordon would say, yeah, that's funny. Oh, I told Mike Greenlees, Mike Greenlees would say, yeah, that's funny, let's do it. And the three of them, I think, well, they know. And you do that, you sort of have to realise what your weakness is and set up someone that you can trust. As I say, for me, it was three people. Set up someone you can trust who are really strong in that area where you're weak. And for me, it was the first part of the job, coming up with an idea. The reductive part is logic. I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that all day long. That's the best part of our job is you think, if I said to other people, you go to a factory and every day you do the same thing. Every day you make widgets. Every day you make same widgets. Every day you go, today it's widgets, tomorrow it'll be beer, the day after it'll be cars, the day after it'll be chocolate, the day after it'll be travel. We got incredibly varied. But our job is just to learn everything there is in the world about everything. We got a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And people pay us huge amounts of money. That's the bit I can do. I love that bit. Now we get to the part about feelings. That's the bit I'm lost. And Paul Arden once said to me, your problem is you see with your brain, I see with my eyes. And that's how it is between art directors and writers. Yeah. Art directors see with their eyes, but writers see with their mind.
Yeah. It's a very good point.
I can see what should be there, but I'm not actually seeing what is there.
Yeah.
And John Webster once said something to me that was really good. He said, John said two things to me about my weaknesses. He said, first off, he said, your weakness is that the script is as good as it ever gets, the ad is as good as it ever gets at script stage. You never allow room for any accidents. You've written it down and that's it, locked off, now you go and shoot it. And what John would always do is he'd listen to all the voices until he found one that was funny. And if it was different to what he'd written, he'd have the funnier one. And he'd look at things and he'd just totally about feelings, what came in. And Gordon will do that sometimes too, things that are funnier. Real art directors do. And then the other thing John said to me that was a weakness of mine, it's the old joke about the golfing gorilla. You know, John used to play golf.
Not come across it.
Oh, okay. So John said they used to tell this joke. He said there's a guy that's going to meet his mate at the golf course, and he turns up there, and his mate's not there, but there's a gorilla with a bit of paper, and he reads the bit of paper, and it says, "I've been called away on an urgent job. This gorilla will give you a game." So he says to the gorilla, "Okay, well in that case, you tee off first." So the gorilla tees off right down the fairway, within 6 inches of the hole. So the fellow says, "All right, I'll give you that hole. Okay, go on the second one." He says to the gorilla, "As you won the last one, you go again." So the gorilla gives it this massive whack right down the fairway within 6 inches of the hole. And he said, "Well, there you go, you win again." And all the way around, it's like that. The gorilla gives it a massive whack within an inch of the hole. And he gives the gorilla anyway. So the gorilla wins 18-0. And afterwards, the guy says to him, "How'd you get on with the gorilla?" He says, "Well, he beat me 18-0. He said every time he'd whack it, and it would just within an inch of the hole, and I'd have to give him the hole." And the gorilla says, "You idiot." He says, "You could have won. The gorilla putts like he drives." And John said, "That's you." You putt like you drive. and I thought, Jesus, he's right. So that's something I have to learn. I can't do subtlety. So so what I need is I need Gordon will do that for me sometimes.
Yeah, sure. It speaks. It's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and it speaks to that thing that you need to have people you can trust, and you need to give away some of your control. If you've got that kind of mind which you're speaking to, and that logic and that thing, you can get so far, but you're ultimately going out into a world, and you're going to be seen by people with a lot more nuance and a lot more subtlety, and you need other people to bring that and give it some roundness.
Well, yeah, it was like Alex Higgins' weakness. He was fantastic, but he couldn't take a little tiny slow shot to roll the thing off. He'd always smash it, so sometimes it went in and came out. And you find it with Sterling Moss. He either won the race or he crashed the car. You couldn't just finish to get second or third and build up the points.
Yeah, sometimes you need a bit of balance.
Well, you do, and I can't do that. So I've got to, when you spot your own weaknesses, you can find people who can address that part. And the truth is, you're probably not doing that part because you're not that interested in it anyway. I've got no patience. So Gordon, I saw this. He reminds me, real art directors. I mean, Paul Arden or Gordon. They remind me of this Helmut Crone quote I read once. You know Helmut Crone?
Yeah.
So Helmut Crone said, "The part I love best about art directing, the part I can't wait for, is about 7 or 8 o'clock at night when the copywriter goes home and leaves me alone with the ad. And I'll be there in the studio until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, trying everything I want to try on my own. And when the copywriter comes in the morning, it will be the ad we came up with and the ad we talked about, but he won't recognise it." And Gordon said, yeah, that's exactly right. I know he can't wait until he gets rid of me. And Paul at the same time, he didn't want people breathing over his neck.
It's funny, Dave, because in my little list of questions, the last question I had, and I don't know why I did this, I followed it through in kind of a narrative of following a process. And in my terrible handwriting says, what do you think, what do you wish you could be better at? And I don't know why I decided to ask that question of you, but you've actually, by following this process, established that the best thing you can do, the strongest hand you can play in creativity, is to know your own weaknesses. And you've already volunteered the weaknesses, and that. But I think it's so important. It is to understand where your talents lie, double down on them, and push that. But then surround yourself with people. Be open. The process goes through moments of being a solo enterprise when you need to dig down, but then you need to open it up again and move back and forth between those. And I think you've given us a fantastic walkthrough there. I don't want to take any more of your time because
no, it's up to you.
That was absolutely fantastic and really, really interesting. I know it'll be very well loved. So thank you very much, Dave.
All right, Glenn. Well, great. All right, thanks a lot, mate. I would take a hand.